Welcome to Focus Schools podcast, Leading for Impact. My name is Brett Bishop, and very pleased to be joined here today by my colleague and friend, Kathy Crum. How are you today, Kathy?
I am fantastic and super excited about our podcast today.
Yeah, it's really exciting. We are both really excited because we have some guests who are going to talk about the wonderful work they're doing at their school, and their school is Stallbrook Elementary School in Bellingham, Massachusetts. And we just want to start by giving them a chance to introduce themselves and what they do at the school. So Shannon, if you would start.
Sure. My name is Shannon Barca, and I am the principal of Stallbrook Elementary.
My name is Christine Morgan. I'm the math specialist here at Stallbrook and a member of our instructional leadership team.
I'm Laurie Crawford. I'm currently a third grade teacher here. Next year, I will take the role of assistant principal at our school and also a member of the instructional leadership team.
Well, congratulations. Really happy for you.
Thank you.
So we are so excited to talk to all of you because our colleague, Carrie Purcell, has been bragging so much about all three of you and all the work you and your school and staff have done that we're excited to finally get to talk to you all. So really appreciate you talking to us today. And maybe you could just do a little introduction for those who would be listening just about your school and teach us a little bit about what's the school like and the demographic and all that, if you help share a little of that.
Yeah, sure. We're one of two elementary schools in town. It's a small town. Our elementary school students range from grades kindergarten through third grade. We have about 230 students. We do also have a preschool here that we have been working towards merging, and next year we will be considered a full pre-K to three.
Nice.
So we're excited about that addition as well.
Yeah, I always had a rule as a principal, if I was ever having a bad day, I would just go to the kindergarten and the pre-K because something funny is happening every minute of every day.
That is amazing. That is my rule. I love that.
You can't stay in a bad mood in there because there's just funny stuff going on, you know?
Well, and I'm a middle school teacher by trade, and so I think those little guys are kind of terrifying. So I'm just really grateful for people who can teach them, right? And they say, and I'm grateful for people who can teach middle school. So, but yeah, well, you guys have been on a journey to choose your targeted learning focus and all the things that go along with that. So yeah, could we start with just you guys telling us a little bit about that story and what stands out to you in that journey that you just had, which it is a journey for sure. So yeah, tell us how it went for you.
Sure, I can start that. Mrs. Barca just joined us this year. This is her first year as our principal. Christine and I were part of this process from the beginning when we first met with Carrie. I will say that I think at the beginning of this process, we were maybe slightly overwhelmed by the task of finding the one thing we were going to focus on. And I think we got stuck in the weeds a little bit when we were talking about finding something that we could use assessment to determine that it was a need. Every time we looked at different assessment points, we kept coming back to the same information. Like vocabulary was a key sticking point for us, that something that we needed to improve upon across the board in all the assessments we had. So we kept coming back to vocabulary, and eventually chose that we wanted our targeted learning focus to revolve around vocabulary in context and students understanding vocabulary and talking and things like that. And from there, we started the task of trying to find our slogan, which turned into Stallbrook Runs on Words. And we made our logo, and we brought the students and the staff in, and the community, the families, all joined us in that. But repeatedly, over and over again, as we kept talking about the learning focus being vocabulary, it was almost too narrow of a focus. It was just something that a lot of the staff kept coming back to us and saying, you know, we have so many things we need to work on here with social emotional skills and behaviors and things like that. Why are we focusing on this? And we kept saying, well, we had to back it up with data. And so the data tells us that we need to work on vocabulary. So that's where we went with it. That's kind of where we ended the year last year in our first year. And then Shannon joined us in the summer, and we started talking about it and, you know, what our focus was, but why we didn't really have full buy-in. And she really kind of managed to broaden it and make it so much more applicable to all areas of our school, as opposed to just thinking about it as vocabulary. So I can maybe you could talk about that.
Yeah, so when I started here this past summer, I was fortunate enough to have my very first meeting. The first week I started it with Focus Schools, which was amazing. But I walked into a year's worth of work. And like a lot of the staff members, I kept finding myself confused at our narrowed approach to the vocabulary and wondering if we had opportunities to broaden this idea of Stallbrook runs on words, knowing that we had multiple focus areas. And so we were able to take that and expand it to look at 4 sub goals, if you will, or 4 objectives. And we took that idea of words and we brought it to, we kept the vocabulary piece. We added student discourse in there. And really, we can talk later about finding our evidence-based practices through Turn and Learn. We added math word problems, which is definitely an area that we want to continue working on. And then bringing this, we had this opportunity to bring social emotional learning and integrate that into the academic piece. And we didn't have a core set of core values here at the school. So it was an opportunity to once again bring the students and the community in to determine what are our core values, what's important to us. Because before we learn any academic, we have to learn what it means to be a kind and compassionate and inclusive citizen. And so we then brought in, and we have our now core values, our 5 core values that are attached to our slogan of Stallbrook runs on words, and then we've attached the words to that. Because we knew that while we may look at this as a 1 to 3 year goal, if we were committing to logos and t-shirts and banners and really, yeah, like if we are saying this is who we are, then we wanted to make sure that our targeted learning focus was broad enough that we can always come back to one of these 4 areas. And the whole community really jumped right in and embraced it. And everything we do, the base of what we do are our 5 words, which are our core values of hardworking, cooperative, respectful, kind, and inclusive. And this is something that all of our students, our staff, and our family members all voted on. And that's how we came up.
Thank you for sharing that. We're in so many schools that the progress that you talked about is very similar. And I love when I was principal and someone taught me, like, it's really about getting launched because it's a journey. And I was like, no, I want to know where we're going. I want to know the end of the story before I start reading it. And my coach was like, no, doesn't work that way. Just got to get launched and see where you go. And I was like, uh-oh. But it was way better that way. And one of the things that interests me so much is when schools can talk about the path. You mentioned like this idea of your evidence-based practices and support your target learning focus, and integrating, our target professional development plan and supporting adults so that they can become experts on these practices. I am truthfully, I probably need a support group because I'm so into this topic, but I'm really pleased to ask you this question. Can you teach us about that? What's the work been like for your team?
When we think about evidence-based practices, we want to get, the biggest bang for our buck. And we've had a lot of professional development around John Hattie's work on effect size. And we really dug into that. We looked at what evidence-based practices are going to have at least a year's worth of growth. And Hattie's research shows that a 0.40 effect size has a year's worth of growth. So we wanted to dig in, and we really wanted to look at student discourse and engagement and that type of evidence-based practice that related to the use of words and context clues and vocabulary. So we settled on a few evidence-based practices that would have, a larger effect size or impact than even just a year's worth of work. So student discourse, Hattie reports that has a 0.882 effect size. So that we sort of dug into that. And we want our students engaged. We want our students to have ownership of what's happening in the classroom. Student discourse seems to be a great place to start. So then we dug a little bit deeper and we focused on what typically is called turn and talk, but we tweaked that a little, and I think we got our inspiration from another school, and we changed it to turn and learn. So we really want our students to be engaging with each other. We want it to be a meaningful and purposeful experience, meaning it's not just, okay, turn and talk to your partner, but it's guided, and it's an instructional routine that the teacher is guiding. So we really dug in with our educators and all staff in the building and looked at what is the teacher's role? What is the student's role? What are our outcomes? How will we know that this has been successful? We do learning walks throughout our building to be able to measure the impact. We do them a couple times a year to be able to look at, how much turn and learn is actually happening in the classroom. Is there carryover? Is it changing student work? What other opportunities do we have? So, we've had so much professional development and collaboration in staff meetings on professional development days. Also, we have weekly PLCs, professional learning communities, where we dig into this. So that's what we said. We really started talking about the turn and learn, and Focus School says not to do too much at once. So we're picking 1 or 2 evidence-based practices at a time, and it's evolving, and we're just embracing it as we go.
And if I can add to that, I think one of the things that was a concern, especially last year when we were talking about what practice we were going to, focus on, was not to make something overwhelming or something that was, people felt like, oh, it's just another thing on our plate. Like it's another thing I have to do. And we really talked about how student discourse, like we could take something most of the teachers were already using, but make it better. So this wasn't a new thing. This is something you do. We're going to teach you how to make it more impactful, how we can really bring it further and improve the engagement, and as well as the depth of knowledge that the students get from the conversations, but it's not anything new. So that's been our focus really, because we don't have to teach people turn and talk. They've been doing that, but maybe not in the most effective way with the most impact. And so we've been really focusing on how to take what we already did and make it better. So that's been a lot of our professional development.
Yeah, and we brought the research into it. So even though it was something they were already doing, we brought the research to it, what the impact is, helps them engage in collaborative experiences to deepen their knowledge, and align it to other things they know, like the depth of knowledge. How do you incorporate depth of knowledge into an instructional routine like this?
Yeah,
I think
sometimes in the Hattie research, they mentioned something having a really high effect size. And I would be like, what? How could that have such a high effect size? But then when you read how they describe it being done, that's when you go, oh, okay, that's a little different than I thought. And it's like, it really deepens the experience.
Those
Yeah.
metacognitive strategies are
Yeah.
really where we get into that critical thinking.
Mhm.
And that's what we want our students to be doing. We want them to be critical thinkers.
Amen
You
to that.
guys really were able to articulate that you chose the best practice that people were already doing, but you just wanted to make it better. And you described to us how you are seeing how it's going in your school with your learning walks and your team time and all that stuff. So with all that though, now at your school by the end of this year, would you say that 100% of your teachers are doing this well, or 80%? And if it's not everybody, then what are some strategies you're using to help everyone do this with fidelity across the school? How's it going?
Yeah, so we did actually engage in a walkthrough with Focus Schools last month. And we were through those walkthroughs. I think the evidence in the 4-minute walkthrough that we had, the evidence showed all but one classroom that we had evidence of that. However, in my regular walkthroughs, I actually am quite confident in saying that 100% of the classrooms are using this strategy and using it effectively. We've provided support resources for the staff and for the students. We have learned about and provided ideas for extension activities. So you have your turn and learn. What do you do after that? What's the extension activity? We've incorporated, like I said, the depths of knowledge and having them change their verb of the questions that they're asking. And so I would say we have 100% using it. And we are probably just over 80% that are using it in the impactful way that we've been teaching it. And that might just be because of what their role is Classroom teachers are all using it, and we're now working with service providers and other specialists on how to use that in an impactful way as well.
And we also, I think, provided supports for, we want teachers to own the process, but also not give them another thing to have to go find visuals for this. So, we had a list of sentence starters, and we had visuals for that for students that may need help with that vocabulary. We had visual pictures and things like that. So we tried to provide as many resources as possible. So this was less daunting for staff to take on. So they could really just dive into the important part, which is how the conversations are happening. What are they doing with those conversations, and how is it impacting the student engagement?
I think something else that became evident in the last learning walk was that this is not just a scripted part of the lesson. Insert, turn, and learn here. We noticed that teachers are really using that in the moment opportunity for learning and making teacher moves where they're noticing, I've asked a question and there's very limited response from the students, limited engagement. This is an opportunity for turn and learn, and being able to utilize that, being aware of what the kids are grasping and not grasping, to be able to insert that turn and learn as an instructional move.
And in addition to that, also, we've seen evidence of teachers strategically planning for the turn and learn. So we're seeing them use it in both ways, which is really
very
nice to see.
versatile.
Yeah.
It's interesting when we initially, sometimes people, I would say, things like social emotional learning or a best practice, they start initially thinking of it as you mentioned, one more thing, or this siloed part of my day. Okay, I got to map out 10 minutes to do social emotional learning, or it's like, nah, that stuff's got to just be integrated in, mixed into the bread there, so that it feels really sort of authentic to the classroom and when it's most effective use. And I think the same as you said, I heard one principal call it like, well, this is a tool in the toolbox that, a carpenter takes out the hammer and puts it back in. We want you to use these practices this way, as well as intentionally planning for them in lessons. Yeah.
And I think a big part of our role as the school leadership is making sure that before we tell them to integrate it, that we do explicitly teach it first to the adults, and then model it ourselves. So we use staff meetings and PLCs as opportunities to explicitly teach the expectations, the research, showing model examples. But then for the core value piece, we're making sure that we are having a whole school meeting once a month where we talk about our core values and the social emotional competencies. We have grade level meetings where we're digging a little deeper. We go into the classroom and we provide resources. Our weekly memo includes different resources to integrate. So we're not just saying good luck, we're modeling it. And then the evidence that we haven't really fully measured, but the evidence would be hearing the language that the teachers are using and the students are using that mirrors the language that we use in our whole school meetings and our grade level meetings.
So we also looked at math word problem solving in math, and how that ties into vocabulary and the use of context clues and student discourse. And we incorporated two different best practices into one: the 3 reads strategy, which directly ties into student vocabulary use and context clues, and the read, draw, write model. So we were able to infuse those two to be able to have students become more successful in understanding really what the problem is asking them and digging into that.
And Christine has done a great job. Again, we've used our staff meetings for this, but her PLCs that she runs for the math PLCs is really looking at not only this practice, but then analyzing student work using this practice.
Yeah. So, we have tons of data, right? We assess kids, we have lots of rubrics and data and spreadsheets and colorful graphs, but we found the most impactful part of this experience was really looking at student work. And we started that at the grade level. So in professional learning communities, we sat down a grade level at a time and looked at student work. And we used some different protocols that focus schools shared with us, the SLICE protocol. And really what we did was we sat down and looked at student work and commented on it and noticed trends and patterns. And then we took that to the staff meeting and were able to do that vertically. So first grade teachers were able to look at kindergarten word problems, and third grade teachers were able to look at second grade, and everybody looked at everybody's student work. And that was maybe one of the most powerful things that we did, because that vertical planning and that vertical opportunity for examining student work doesn't happen at the classroom level often. We need to be able to collaborate as a school community to be able to do that. And it really helps to know where your students are coming from and where they're going to next to be able to impact your own learning.
And having that common protocol, common language, common expectations, we know also increases student learning. So it's great to have that throughout the.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me how impactful looking at student work can be as a trusted source of data for teachers, where sometimes there's a lack of trust for, say, state testing or interim assessments or those kind of things. When, when it's our student work, we maybe have a little more trust and a little less anxiety around it. And I think it can be hugely impactful. I wondered if you could just speak to, if you were talking to another school who was getting started with this process, do you have any words of wisdom for them? Any recommendations as they get into this kind of work that you've been doing?
I would say two important things. One is being able to get buy-in, but I mean that in a sincere, genuine way. Sometimes when I hear like, oh, you have to get buy-in, sometimes the implication can be, you've got to market this, you got to get people to like it. But for me, I see buy-in as you have to give them the reason, the purpose behind it, the research behind it. And I think that the team at Stahlberg has done a fabulous job framing the learning, setting the stage, providing that background information, the research, the purpose for what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's so important because it doesn't feel like another initiative coming down. It's saying, hey, this works. Let's try it out. Giving them the freedom to make mistakes is very important too. We're not looking for perfection here. We're looking for growth. And the second thing is making sure that you have a structure. So many times I've seen where whether it's an initiative or a targeted learning focus is put out there in the beginning of the year, but there's not a whole lot of follow through. And I think our job is to make sure that we provide the structure and the cohesion so that it doesn't feel like something else. It feels like this is what we're doing all year, and bringing that in a cohesive way. And kind of what you were saying earlier, Brett, those of us that are backwards designers in our heart, we can still say, but what is the end goal? How do we backwards design that? And I think that our professional development through our staff meetings and PLCs have been a great example of that. We know where we want to be at the end of the year. How do we backwards design that, benchmark that, and create a progression of learning and skills and practices so that they feel comfortable to implement it on their own and have other people walk through and take a look at it. I would say, but
I think it's also important for people to have that exemplar, that model for what good looks like, especially with the practices, again, turn and talk is something teachers are very, but when we started talking about really the importance of it and what were the important aspects of it, there were a lot of pieces that we weren't necessarily doing in the classroom on a regular basis. And also in the gym class or the art class, this is going across all the classes now. And everyone knows what good looks like and what it really should be and why it should be that. And I think that's super important for people to understand, to not just have like, oh, this is what we're doing, but it needs to be like, why we, like Shannon said, why are we doing it? But also what should it look like? And I think they need that model.
And I think I would add in with my math hat here that the importance of data, that often when we're looking for one thing to focus on, because we don't want to do too many things at once, it's easy to just go off hunches or I'm noticing this, I'm noticing that, but we have to move away from that and really focus on what story is the data telling us and use that data as our source for where we need to make change. We need to not make assumptions. We can't blame the test. We can't blame the students. We need to really have that pause for equity. We need to verify our causes and make changes slowly and purposefully based on that data and monitor it over time. We need to use our data to our advantage.
that was so well said.
Thank you.
Yeah, small wins and big wins all the way for sure. Yeah, so you said getting true buy-in through the research and really getting to people's hearts, and then showing exemplars and the use of data along the way. All those are really smart things, and we are never finished. So what do you think is your next step as you go into the next school year?
So we focused a lot on our turn and learns this year. So next year, I see that as being a year of not just celebration, but continuing the exemplars and having our own teachers be the exemplars of this work, and invite colleagues throughout the district to engage in some of these walkthroughs as well. Taking our math to that next level, and ensuring that these practices are in 100% of the classrooms, which I think we are close to that again. But what we really are excited to do is look at our end of the year data to see if what we did work. So that is our biggest next step. We're going to continue with our core values. And then what we didn't, now here's the funny part, we bring this full circle. We talked about how we started with the vocabulary, and felt it was too narrowed of a view of a targeted learning focus. And when we expanded it to 4, we really focused on 3 this year, and didn't focus as much on the vocabulary, which is very interesting because that's where we began. But next year, we're going to be able to take the vocabulary and really look at the importance of using content vocabulary, understanding it, applying it in our learning. So we knew that if we went to 4 sub goals, we couldn't do it all in 1 year, and that's the beauty of having a 3-year goal, and beyond if we need it.
So helpful. And I guess to me, one of the things that's very clear in listening to you all is there's a really inclusive spirit behind the leadership that you're providing, and that you're enlisting and inviting and bringing people along as they need to. And I think that's sometimes that's forgotten how important that is in schools, in terms of everybody's going to probably have to go at different, pace and different timeline. But to me, if the results are fixed, we're all going to get there, but we're going to take different time and different needs of support to get there. Yeah, I think that's really valuable. And I just can't imagine myself, starting out as a principal and being able to listen to all of you would be such a gift. And we're so appreciative of you talking to us. I always felt like I only had one leadership tool when I became a principal, and that was panic. And so I had to gain some other tools from my toolbox. So listening to people like you would be so helpful. And I just know I speak for people who will listen to this to say thank you for giving your time to lots of folks you probably never meet. We really appreciate it. And we also want to say thank you to the people who are either listening or watching this pod/video cast. We really appreciate you taking time, and we encourage you to interact with our social media pages, which can be found on our webpage and focusschools.com. And if you can interact with people who are doing the same work you are all over the country, we think people have found that really helpful. So again, thank you for listening, and we want to say a huge thank you to you folks for joining us here today and telling your story. And thank you, Kathy. Great to see you as always.